happen the way they do?
Yeah.
Little kids that come up to me and grandkids, when they get 3, 4 years old, 5 years old, why Grandpa? Why Papa? They always want to know why. Well, tonight we're going to talk about why. Do you ever just wonder why? We're going to be studying Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1, and we're down to verse 9 tonight. We're going to have to pick up a little speed, or it'll be a long time before we get through Genesis. This will be the third shot at it, and we're just at verse 9, so I don't know. Listen to what David said. Now, David, you guys know who David is. King David, the shepherd boy. And he wrote these words. He said, "O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You've set your glory above the heavens, and out of the mouths of babes and infants you've established strength because of your foes, to still the enemy and the avenger. And when I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you've set in place, what is man that you're mindful of him? And the Son of Man that you care for him? Yet you have made him little lower than the heavenly beings, and crowned him with glory and honor. And you've given him dominion over the works of your hands. You've put all things under his feet, all sheep and oxen, and also the beasts of the field, and the birds of the heavens, and the fish of the sea, whatever passes along the paths of the sea. O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth." Well, we are a curious race, aren't we? We always want to know. We want to know how things work, and we want to understand things. We want to know why life is like it is. And David was just like us when he wrote that psalm. Now today, when we get into the book of Genesis, we're going to hear questions. They're existential questions. They just exist. They sort of float in the atmosphere. They're just here, and they want answers. And we're going to know. The questions are floating like, why is the sky blue? And why is the dry land? And why is there oceans? And why is there green stuff that grows on the ground? And why are there animals here? And where do babies come from? And what are we supposed to eat? And why did God make me? Just questions, questions, questions. All those that we want to know. Now, the earth was created as a place where life could flourish. This planet is perfectly designed for human life. It is made for us so perfectly. I just feel like that when the great Creator made this place, He had us in mind. We're the last thing that came along in His creation, It took Him 5 creative days to get things made, and then He made us on the 6th creative day. And all that time that passed, I think He was setting up the planet so that there would be a place for us where we could live and where we could exist. People are asking me all the time, well, what about dinosaurs in the Bible? Where are they? We find them in the geological record. We find their bones and their where do they come from in the Bible? Well, the Bible is pretty silent about where they came from, but folks, there's a whole lot of space and time passed in those very first creative days. A lot of stuff happened in those. Some call it the gap theory. There's a huge gap in time that where the whole world was changing. Now, they tell us that at the end of one of the geological time periods, that something wiped out all the megafauna, all the dinosaur, all the large lizards, all those bad things were wiped out in just one fell swoop, because immediately replacing them was the smaller folks like us. Now, and it would have been very difficult for us to have survived on a planet if we'd had to fight with dinosaurs and these sorts of things to live. So God had that all just set up just right. And the earth was created as a place where human life, could flourish. Everything exists because God put it in motion. Everything exists and functions at the bidding of God. It all works because our Creator made it work like that and put it in working order. So tonight we're going to sort of look over the shoulder of the Creator. We're going to stand back behind Him tonight as He's orchestrating great movements and creating and changing. And we're going to get to step back behind Him and look at the planet and how He set things up So let's begin, and I want to say to you that the first thing that God did at this point, that we're going to talk about tonight, is that He made the atmosphere. He put this planet, He gave it a gaseous atmosphere to shroud our planet, encircles our planet. And they tell me that without that atmosphere, we couldn't live on planet Earth, because we have to breathe oxygen, but also because of the radiation of outer space. If that wasn't up there to shield us, we'd all just be fried, crispy critters here in about 10 seconds, because we'd be fried up. So let's look at what God did and see how He put this all together. If you're ready for verse 6, I said let's go to verse 6. And God said, "Let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water." So God made the vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it. And it was so. And God called the vault sky. And there was evening and there was morning the second day. Someone came to me after one of the sermons that I preached here on Genesis not too long ago, and they said to me, "Pastor, you know what? I believe God was a night owl. He worked at night." And I thought, well, I don't understand. What do you mean? He said, well, because it says, and then it was evening, and then it was morning the second day. God worked at night. And I never thought about that before. Makes sense, doesn't it? But here's what He did. He separated the water from the water. Now, I think you already figured out what this is like. You know, in the atmosphere, there is suspended water particles. That's what clouds are made out of, and the atmosphere has a lot of suspended water in it that's saturating our atmosphere. So God separated the water in the atmosphere from the water on the surface of the planet. And the vault, He used that word here, it's an English translation of an old Hebrew word, but that vault that He made is the sky. It's the distance between the two, the opening between them. Now, the surface of the planet is covered with 2/3 of the planet's surface is covered with water. We live on a water planet. That's the way God made it. It's made with 2/3 of water. And God made water in many of its forms. Now, what are the forms of water? Well, we got water, liquid water. We got ice cubes. It's hard water. We got gaseous when it's steam. Water comes in those sorts of forms. And God made it and put it all together in that form. Now, it was no accident early in the development of the planet, the second day, that water was put in place. This makes great sense that God put water here pretty early on. Life is water dependent. I'll say it again. Life is water dependent. Now, that doesn't mean God couldn't create life that doesn't need water. But as we study and look over His shoulder, we see that He uses water to help create life. Now, scientists today, there are a lot of people that are looking out in the outer space, and they're trying to figure out if there's life out on some of the moons of Jupiter, and they're trying to figure out if there's life on Mars. And they say that whenever you find water, you can almost be sure that you're going to find some life. And it holds true, because life is water dependent. So God made it like that. He put water in the sky, in the atmosphere, and then He put water on the surface of the planet on the second day. Now, verse 9. Now, at this point, we're going to watch Him bring the continents and separate them from the sea, because 1/3 of the Earth's surface is covered with land mass, with dry ground, and 2/3 of the planet is covered with water. And so we're going to watch now God do that. Let's read verse 9. And God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear." And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters He called seas. And God saw that it was good. So when you finish this creation and the separation of water from dry land, He realized that was good, because that was going to be a perfect setup for human beings to live on the planet. We knew that it was going to have to be that way. Now, folks, you know that the oceans of our planet are like a huge kidney. They evaporate water, goes up into the clouds. The clouds rain down on the dry land. The dry lands, the water washes back down and through the rivers, goes back to the sea, where the clouds pick it up again. And that process cleans our waters. It keeps our planet clear. And God made it that way. Now, if you were with me on the first time we looked at Genesis 1, I told you the two Hebrew words that I love about Genesis, the tohu and the bohu. It was empty and it was formless. And so it was tohu and it was bohu. And so when God saw that early earth, that emptiness and formless, He began to replace that with order, and water and dry land needed to be separated to accomplish what God wanted to create. Now the balance, as I said, was critical. God had to have this just right, and He knew that the separation of land from sea would be good before He did it. Now, and I want you to notice there, and the end of that, it says there in verse 10, and God saw that it was good. Now I want to tell you right now, God wasn't surprised at that. Okay, He didn't create that and say, wow, that turned out better than I thought. No, that's not what that means. Okay, it just means God is commenting on the fact that it was good, this separation. And I've heard people say, well, do you think that surprised God because that turned out so good? Because it says, and God saw that it was good. Like, oh wow, that's pretty good. No, not at all. God's God, and He knew it was going to be good before He did it. But I just want you to see that there. Now, what I want to share with you again tonight, and I want to help you remember, is that this Genesis account is a very well told story. It's been told for generations and generations and generations. And what we're having tonight, not so much science, not so much figurative truth, but we're having poetry as this is explained, and how God did this. It's reached the point of poetry, and that's why it says, and God saw that it was good. It's just a way to show us in the art form that it was a blessing, and God said it was good. So this is poetic addition, not a surprise to God. Now, the next thing that we notice God does in verse 11 is that immediately whenever we have water separated from dry ground, and God says, well, we're going to have something growing on this dry ground. We're going to need some grass, some trees, some apple trees, and some fig trees, and some walnut trees, and some hedge apples, and some Canadian thistles. So, let's see what He says there. Verse 11. Then God said, let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seeds in it, according to their various kinds. And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seeds according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seeds in it according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. And then there was evening and there was morning, the third day. Now someone noted and have mentioned to me, or maybe I've read that before God ever created animals and put them on the planet, He put their food there first. That's just the way God would do it, and I mean that makes sense. Before He was going to create anything else, He made a way to feed them. So He was way ahead of us. So life in vegetative form burst forth from the earth. As you guys are aware, this planet is saturated with life. I mean, everywhere you look, there's life just springing into existence, because that's the way God made it. He made that vegetation, but He didn't make vegetation just to live and die. He made it to live and then reproduce itself in its own kind. So bluegrass will always produce bluegrass. It will hardly ever produce fescue. With me? All right? And apple trees, they'll produce apple trees, because God made them in their various kinds and with the seed in them. In other words, they reproduce their kind. That's how He made it to do. God is so smart and so wise. He knew that we would need these reproductive methods to keep our planet covered with vegetation, because the seasons and the cold and all, we just would need that. So according to their kinds, indicates that evolution of plant life was locked into species, and species ordered by a creator. God locked that in from the beginning, and He made it that way. Trees, as I said, will never produce whales. Whales will never reproduce apples. The third created day saw land form and begin to grow vegetation. God did it on the third day. Well, we're moving on right along. Let's see what He did the next day. Verse 14. Now, in this one, in verse 14 and all, we're going to see that God put everything that we see in the sky. And in verse 16 is one this is something that caught my attention like 30 years ago, when I was probably teaching through this for the very first time. I saw a verse in verse 16 it just seems to be a little throwaway verse, just kind of stuck in there. And it says, and He also made the stars. All right? Do you understand what I just said? And He also made the stars. He made the entire universe. But it's still sort of a throwaway verse. Let's start at verse 14 and read it. But don't let verse 16 slip by you there. And God said, let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times and days and years, and let them be lights in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth. And it was so. God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day, and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. God set them in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth, to govern the day and the night, to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the fourth day. So on the fourth day, the fourth creative day, the light from the stars filled the universe. Now, if you're a scientist or a physicist, and you understand that when light is the fastest traveling. Yeah, isn't that great? We're having the rain separated from the... Yeah. Only Cowboy Church would applaud when it rains, man. We're farmers. We understand how important that is. And now on this day, we notice that light fills the universe on the fourth creative day. And I want you to see this, that God turned on all those stars. Just turned them all on. And they began to form and burst with their thermonuclear furnaces, and light would flashed out from them. And the universe filled itself up with light. And God did it on that fourth day. Now the planet, of course, we know rotates and spins around the star every 24 hours. And we begin to count days and set order to our calendar. And God set in the 24-hour day and 7-day week and the 365-day year. See, God put that all together to work. There was two water buffaloes standing out on the African plain, just eating grass, standing out there just looking around and chewing on their grass. One of the water buffalo looked at the other and he said, "This just doesn't seem like Tuesday to me." What's a Tuesday feel like? What does a Monday feel like? Well, I know what Monday feels like.
A water buffalo.
A water buffalo. Good. But God put all this in order. 7 days, worship days, work days, rest days. It was an interesting time. Now, our modern calendar, the way we have our calendar today, didn't get formulated until the Roman era. Back in the days before the Roman times, the calendars were not as accurate. Interestingly enough, some of the ancient calendars didn't even include January and February. Do you know that? Yeah. They just got to that time of the year and they said, "Oh, who cares?" Nothing going on this time of year anyway, so who cares? But we have a 365-day year, just about, and anyway. And he also made the stars. He made a lot of stars. Now, as I've told you the other night, in our galaxy there are stars as numerous. You remember I used the little story of the little bird that flew from the west coast all the way across America with a piece of sand in his beak? Went to the east coast and put it there, and then he flew all the way back, got him another piece of sand. Remember I told you that story about eternity? Well, I want you to know that as many pieces of sand as there are on our west coast and on our east coast and all the coasts of the planet, every grain of sand, there are more stars in our galaxy than there are pieces of sand on our beaches. And there are more galaxies in our universe, you with me, than there are pieces of sand on our beaches. God made a big old place out there. The universe is nearly infinitely large. Now, the universe is so large, as you know, that light from some of those stars still haven't reached planet Earth. They've been burning out there for billions of years, and their light still hadn't got here. That's how big this place is. Now, so let's keep going, because God made a lot of good stuff. Now, all living things in the water God made. Verse 10, verse 20. And God said, "Let the water teem with living creatures, and let the birds fly above the earth across the vault of the sky." So God created the great creatures of the sea, and every living thing with which the water teems, and that moves about in it, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, and he said, "Be fruitful, and increase in number, and fill the water in the seas, and let the birds increase on the earth." And there was evening, and there was morning, the fifth day. God created everything. Now, I don't want to get into an argument with you about how He did that. That's beneath us. All that matters is that God did it. He created all this stuff. And He filled the oceans and He filled the skies with animals. And He knew that we would need them. Now, then in verse 24, He's going to start making the dry land animals. Let's read about them. And God said, "Let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds. The livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to its kind." And it was so. And God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. Well, God made it all. Every one of them He put in place. And then, let's quickly move now to where we're going to be the most interested. Because there is a lot of debate today about where did we come from as human beings. Where did we start? Why are we here? What's it all about? Let's read verse 26 and begin to let God speak to us in a very simplistic, poetic way. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created mankind in His own image. Now, before we go on to and read the rest of verse 27, let me give you the word that is translated for image. And it is the word icon. How many of you have a computer? And on your screen, you have an icon, all right? And if you've got a touch screen, you touch the icon and it opens up the app or the website or whatever, because the icon is a representation of something else, okay? And so God made us in His icon. That's the Greek word, the icon. We are in the image of God. In other words, we are God's representative on planet Earth. And we're, whether you believe this or not, we are like God. I didn't say we were God, but we're like Him. I want to talk about that in great number. Let's keep reading now, and we'll come back and pick that up. Verse 27. So God created mankind in His own image. In the image of God, He created them, male and female. He created them. So, God is not a man. Understand that? Now, we anthropomorphize God. In other words, we try to make God have a man's understanding, a man's image. But God is spirit. Right? He is a spirit. And so when He created us, we were made like His spirit is made. But when He made human beings, He made us male and female. He made us two sexes so that we could reproduce. And then He said in verse 38, God blessed them and said, "And then be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves along the ground." I heard a preacher one time was preaching on this, and he was remembering how many people are on planet Earth. And he said, "Well, that's one thing for sure we've done well. We've filled the earth with people. We have certainly reproduced ourselves, and the planet is filled with people." I wish I had the statistics to tell you. In my lifetime, the numbers of people on planet Earth have increased by 2 billion people. In my lifetime. In my lifetime, 2 billion people, more than when I got here. And so we are doing a good job of that. Now let's talk about the image and the likeness of God. What is the image of God that we bear? How is it that we are like Him? Well, something that separates us from God's other creatures. There's something about us, the way He made us, that's different. We're not just a smart monkey, okay?
Amen.
And some people don't even go quite that high, but most of us aren't. We're not just a smart monkey. There's something unique about us. Now, the human being as an unspiritual, not born again race, that it is a race that have animalistic. We're like the animals in that way. But when Christ comes into our lives, we become spirit like God. So there is something different about us that separates us from all the other animals. One thing is that we have the ability to reason. God made human beings with the ability to think, to realize. He made us to be aware of the fact that we are alive, that we exist. I'm told that animals do not have awareness of their self-existence. They live, but they don't realize that they're living. That's what I've heard people say. But human beings, I'm alive, and I know it. I'm standing here tonight speaking to you, and I know it. I'm aware of the fact that I am here speaking. There's something about that. I have the ability to think, the ability to reason. Another thing that is unique about us that's very much like God, and that is we have an immortal soul. There is a part of you and a part of me that is immortal, that it will never die. It will never cease to exist, never cease to function. We are immortal. As God is immortal. God was there at the beginning, and He's there at the end. And we now have that undying nature within us. And that's like God. Now we also have moral autonomy. We get to make moral choices. And animals don't make moral choices. My mother's little pet dog bit her the other day, and she had to have stitches in her hand. Her little pet dog bit her, and you can't get mad at the little dog because he didn't make a moral choice. She just got close to his food when he was trying to eat it. He didn't make a choice. He didn't say, "Oh, I hate that old woman, so I'm just going to bite her." Not at all. He loves that. But the thing is, the dog didn't make a moral choice. But you and I make moral choices. We get to choose. You see, we all are tempted every day. We're tempted to do sinful things, to do good things, to do bad things. We're tempted all the time. But we reserve the right to choose. That's one thing I get to do. I get to choose how I'm going to live my life. So we know the difference between what is right and what is wrong. Some interesting studies have just come out recently in the studies of infants. They've been studying little infants just before they could talk, before they could do anything. And they have a born-in sense of right and wrong before they're old enough to learn it. It's built into them. They figured out that the little bitty babies have a built-in sense of right and wrong. It's just something God put in us. Now, we're not built like God physically because God is not physical, but we're like Him in those ways. Now, what is the job description for mankind? What is our job description? What has God told us to do as a human being, as a race? He said two things. To manage the earth. That's number one job. As God's representative, we are to manage the planet Earth. We're to be over the animals, the fish, the agriculture. We're to manage planet Earth, the environment, the ecology. The whole thing is ours to manage. And number two, reproduce the human race. We have two job descriptions as human beings: reproduction and management. Now, everything that breathes air is to eat vegetation. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about might sound like I'm trying to get you to be a vegetarian, and I'm certainly not. But at this point in Genesis, or in this story, as it's told to this point, everything was vegetarian. Now, later, we're going to watch a new thing will happen as we read through Genesis. We're going to see that God opened up the food pantry to include flesh. But at this point in Genesis, everything is vegetarian. All right, let's read it. Then God said, I give you every seed, verse 29. Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. Okay, there it is. That's what you get to eat. Fruit and vegetables. And verse 30. And to all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds of the sky, all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food. And it was so. Well, immediately my mind went to thinking, well, what about carnivorous animals, lions and tigers and bears? And, oh my, what about those kind of things? Well, as you walk with me through Genesis, you're going to see that there was a change in the very nature of the carnivorous animal. Because up to this point, as God made them, they were to eat grass or vegetation. after the fall of Adam, animal flesh was added to our diet. All right, so here's what you need to know. In 6 creative days now, God has created everything. Now, what was the last thing God created? Us. We're the last on the list of things that He created. We weren't. I think I know why He did that. He didn't want any advice. Don't you think? Is that right? He didn't want any advice on how to do this. See, don't make it. I always make you guys last. And you just sit around and shut up until I get done. So we are God's representatives on the earth, and we're here to steward the planet. We're to take care of the planet. God owns everything. Now, if I could get this through my head and get this through your head, I would literally free you up from the worry of materialism. You would never have another worry about things. If you just could get this through your head, God owns everything. Now, when you get your paycheck or your Social Security check or whatever you get your money, it says it has your name, a page of the order of, and your name goes right there. Now, what do you do with that? Well, you buy groceries, you pay your rent or your mortgage, and then one day when you paid your mortgage long enough, the bank will call and say, okay, you've paid enough, come down and I'm going to give you your title, and when you go get your title, you look and it says, this property belongs to so-and-so and so. Guess what? It does not. It does not belong to you. No. You may have a title to it, but God owns it. And you've been allowed just to use it for all these years. And your income, your salary, you didn't earn that. God gives that to you. And He says, here you go, I'm going to let you manage it. Now, why does He give some people so much and some people not so much? Well, maybe He can't trust some of you with very much. Maybe you're not managing it like you need to be. Okay. If the shoe fits, you wear it, okay? But I just know this. God owns everything. And we are to manage His possessions. And you knew, if you give me enough time, that in the book of Genesis, I'd talk about giving, wouldn't you? I'm a preacher. You just knew I was going to get around to that. And so I think what God wants us to do is, as we are given things, we're given, but we're also to be givers to others. We don't need to hoard it up, pile it up, see how high we can get this, how many toys we can get, but we're to live our lives simply and then to share with others. God owns it all, and we're simply to manage it. You don't own your car, your home, your land, or your bank account. Now, I can't tell you how many funerals I've preached in my ministry. I don't even know. But I'll be honest with you, I've never seen one casket with a place to put money in it. You know, they don't come with a place to put. By the way, a guy that I heard about, his name was John, and he owed money to a guy, and the guy and John thought he found out that the guy he owed the money to had died, and he thought, well, now how in the world am I going to pay him now that he's died? Because I've owed him all this money all this time, and I never gave it to him, and now what am I going to do? And he worried about this, and his conscience began to bother him. So he went to the funeral, and as he passed by the casket, he slipped something into the casket with the man, and so he walked on back. And somebody later said, "What did I see you put something in there?" He said, "Yeah, I owed him some money, so I wrote him a check." Your health is God's.
Yes, that's right.
Your health is God's too. Every healthy moment you have of life. Well, health is so important, isn't it? If we don't have that, we don't have anything. And God owns it. And we are to steward that health that He's given us. We're to manage it and to take care of it. Our relationships are His. He has put us in this world and put people into our lives. He put you in my life and put me in your life. And He put my wife in my life and gave us the children that He wanted us to have. He put people in our lives to bless us. And then He said, but these relationships are mine. I've given them to you. And now you're to manage them and take care of them. Now some relationships I've not done a good job taking care of. But God gave them everyone to me. And if I'd have done a better job, I'd have more friends. So we see that God made it all. Our health is His, our relationship is His. Verse 31, God saw that all He had made, and it was very good. and there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. Now I want to close by telling you that in spite of everything that I've told you, I'm going to ask you a hard question. Does God rule the entire universe? And be careful before you answer, because I'm going to tell you that He doesn't. He does not rule the entire universe. He has allowed a little bitty space in the heart of human beings that He does not rule.
That's right.
He's allowed there to be just a little bitty place in every one of us that He says, I will rule it if you want me to, or if you'll let me. But I'm going to create a little space in every human being, and I'm not going to rule there. I'm not going to force my rule into that. So, does God rule the entire universe?
Only if we let Him.
Only if we let Him. Only if we let Him. Do you let Him? Have you let Him rule that little space inside you? Your will? See, He rules there only by permission. And so tonight what I want you to know is, what I encourage you to do is, give God permission to rule inside you. Give Him permission to make decisions for you and be your Lord and your boss and take care of you. Let God rule. Let's pray.